Every single time I record this episode, I listen to it, I try to edit it, and I don't like the way I've said things, or I think of, oh, this would have been great to say here. And I think this is an episode that's deeply important to me because it's an episode that I wanted to do for months, really and truly. And this is the time slot where I think I've been called to do it. I'm saying this like it's going to be a deeply moving, spiritually salient episode. We're talking about sex, the deed, fucking. And we are talking about this idea and this notion that I've read, and you've probably seen lots of time, this idea that Gen Z, my generation, my people, them, are having the least amount of sex than any other generation, which is very, very shocking. There are multiple reasons why it shocked me. Given the fact that we are the most sex positive generation, given the fact we are the generation with the largest access to resources and knowledge about sex, we're the generation that had sex ed every single year, and it wasn't just don't have sex and you'll die. It was like deep and it was meaningful, and we're a generation of sexual liberation almost, and this exploration of sexuality, and also sexuality in terms of who you're attracted to, but also sexuality within yourself. There are so many things about our generation that screams we should be doing it everywhere and anywhere and any time, that the statistic feels shocking. And so I spend a lot of time, as I usually do, reading articles, talking to friends, deep diving head first into Reddit. And today's episode, I like to title The Unofficial Deep Dive into the Sex Lives of Gen Z. That is a play on words to the TV show, The Sex Life of College Girls. Love that show. Hilarious, quality TV. And also, this is almost like a part 2 to my situationship episode. Last season, I did an episode talking and exploring the different reasons why Gen Z might be in situationships. And if you haven't watched that episode or listened to that episode, I highly recommend that you go ahead and do so, because a lot of the themes are tied and quite salient. So that being said, geniuses, this is the second class of summer school. So get your notepads out, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's get onto it.
Female genius.
Disclaimer. Actually, before I start, this is a serious disclaimer. Actually, I have 3. My first disclaimer is this is not an episode to encourage you to go and have sex. This is not an episode to disencourage you from having sex. This episode is more of an encyclopedia of thoughts, ideas, and opinions about sex, specifically Gen Z sex. And so please do not see it as me or an episode. Like I've done an episode where I'm like, guys, do this, it's going to change it. Don't see it as an episode like that. Think of it as a collection of thoughts and ideas to help you ponder and think about something going on beyond yourself from a societal level. Okay. It's a literature review of sex, okay, not how to do, what to do about it. Kind of remove yourself. But if that being said, if there's something that speaks to you about this episode, or something that calls you to think about something differently or approach something differently, amazing. If you feel nothing about this episode, amazing. Like, you're not really supposed to feel a type of way. So that's my first disclaimer. Second disclaimer, this is more for any family members listening to this episode, or any future employers, although I feel like I can sue you if you don't hire me on the basis of this episode. Anything I say, any stories I tell, for the sake of my sanity and your sanity, is pure fiction. For many, many years, and for multiple generations, there is always talks about this idea of a sex recession. This idea that young people aren't actually having as much sex as we need them to or we want them to. And this is often spoken about hand in hand with a declining population rate, especially nowadays. You can see this as a main topic and a main point of concern, that less and less women or people are deciding to have children, or have as many children as they did a few years ago. It's quite interesting to track the historical basis of how we perceive and talk about sex in the political sphere. And I'm not going to go into this in that episode, honestly, because I feel quite ill-equipped. But around the late 1900s, so 1980s, 1990s, in America, there was a large push for sex ed, particularly about birth control and how to have sex and things like that, in high schools, because teenage pregnancies were an all-time high. And so the government was so concerned about driving that down and driving those levels below. And so sex ed became a regular and important practice, not just don't have sex and abstinence, mean girl style. It was, here is how to use a condom. Here are methods of birth control. These are the diseases that you can get and can be spread, but this is how you access help about the diseases. And sex education became such an important part of a young teenager's lives. That being said, I also feel like a lot of our impressions and education around sex, especially now for Gen Z, has been online. I mean, I don't know about you, and I don't know about your family structure. You may have a beautifully open family, and you guys might sit around the dinner table talking about penises. But me and my Nigerian household, it never came up. In fact, sex was something that was to be held in the confines of marriage. And this is largely a religious point of view as well as it is a cultural point of view. You were supposed to talk and learn and think about and figure out sex within marriage. It wasn't supposed to be talked outside of marriage, you know? And so abstinence was the standard. And so that meant that for young people who are in this environment or in that kind of cultural or social situation, a lot of the education now shifted online. And so that is something we are going to dig deep and kind of talk about a little bit today. But first and foremost, let's go back to the statistic that I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, right? Where is all of this coming from? And so there are a bunch of statistics that say different things. And obviously different countries have slightly different statistics. But for example, 25% of Gen Z adults reported they have not yet had partnered sex. Okay. About 19% of Gen Z women aged 18 to 24 reported having no sexual activity in the past year, compared to 12.6% of millennial women aged 25 to 34 reporting the same. And so the massive notion is millennials and all of the people above, they're doing it all the time, whereas Gen Z aren't doing it or have not done it at all. In fact, apparently we have the highest rates in comparison to other generations when they try to match up timelines of virgins in most generations than others. And so we're going to go through different potential reasons as to why this may be. We're going to come to different conclusions. And yeah, this is a literature review episode. I love the literature review episodes because it's just an opportunity for me to nerd out a little bit, to talk about all of the fun things I've read. I have a lot of fun prepping for this episode. Anyway, so number one, which is very closely linked to the situationship episode, is that the current dating market has become incredibly complex, okay? Ever since we've introduced social media and the digital medium, and our world view has gotten bigger than those who live down the street, sex and dating has become an absolute minefield, right? Helen Fisher, who is one of my favorite anthropologists, social anthropologists in particular, and she tends to study mating and love, says that and attributes the sex decline to a decline in couplehood among young people. Fewer people are getting married, and anybody who is getting married much later in their life. And if fewer people are getting married and fewer young people are in serious committed relationships, logically that would mean fewer young people are having sex. In fact, obviously, it makes more sense that if you are in a committed long-term relationship, you are probably having more sex than people who are not. We have a changing landscape of meeting people. Before, you would meet people in bars, in clubs, in various third spaces, at your friend's house party for the new flat they've moved in after uni. That has now disappeared for a variety of different reasons. There are large amounts of economic factors that come into play where young people are so broke they can't afford to go out. When a pint of beer is so expensive that you just say, let me stay in my parents' house and scroll on TikTok. Less young people are moving out. Less young people are moving out their parents' home. No, can't really bring a guy home if your dad is next door. You know what I mean? And so all of these different layers are probably contributing to young people having a lot less sex. We can also talk about the dating market, okay? Online dating and hookups is a minefield I would not wish on my worst enemy. And I personally abstain from online dating. I think it's like the fourth level of hell. Honestly, I dabbled. Okay, I've done the Bumble, I've done the Tinder. I went on a horrible Tinder date. I say horrible, people have gone on worse. I went on a Tinder date. I met this guy on Tinder. Okay, this is fictional for my family listening. I went on this Tinder date and I met this guy. His pictures looked really great. I was like, cool. We both matched, which as a Black woman is quite rare. I tend not to match with the people I like, and that's okay. That's also another added factor with dating apps. We'll come back to that. But we matched, and then he was like, oh, I'm going to bring a friend. Would you bring a friend? So I brought my friend at that time. We walk in, there's two guys, not to mock anybody for their height, but I am 5'8". He was 5'5". That is not what his profile said. You liar. Like, if you are 5'9", I am 6'4", and I should be playing in the NBA, because that is crazy. And he had his friend, fine. And then there was another girl there who I'm so convinced and so sure was dating the friend that he bought. And these were Italians, right? And the entire time we were sitting in this bar talking, he was just referencing how many rappers he knows. Central C, Dave, Kanye, Lil Wayne, and then proceeded to go on like a 25-minute soliloquy about how much he loves rap and black women, and anybody that's not a black woman is boring and unseasoned and brings nothing into his life. And he talks about his ex-girlfriend who was a black woman the entire time and how he was still obsessed with her and in love with his ex-girlfriend. Why my friend stood there, honestly, on her own, because the second guy was catering to his girlfriend that was crying and walking in and out. And it was crazy. But you get what I mean? The online dating platform is absolutely cooked. Not even from a meeting perspective, right? It's shown that statistically certain groups perform better on dating apps than others. So if you are a white woman or an Asian woman, you will fare pretty well on dating apps. If you're a white man, you will fare amazingly. Whereas if you are a black woman or an Asian man, you tend to perform very, very poorly on dating apps, and you're less likely to get good matches, or people are less likely to match with you based off of that. So that is an added bias and factor that online dating is supposed to remove and only adds. It's completely a superficial platform. You're judging people based off of 3 small lines they give you: their picture, their star sign, and their age, potentially their job, potentially whatever they decide to funny thing to show their personality. And you're very quick to spot and pick out things that you would usually pass if you met a person in person, but on a dating app you're just so much more picky. Oh, he's 5'8", swipe left. When in reality, if you were to meet him in real life, you'd be like, that's actually not that short. Like you're fine height. But just the notions and these ideas and these perceptions in your head are really negative. That's not to say you can't meet people on online dating apps. I'm sure people have had so many successful experiences on dating apps. I know a couple of people who have had, and it's amazing that you managed to find love in an environment that feels very much against it. You also have to talk about this idea of choice overload when it comes to online dating, which increases the likelihood of dissatisfaction. If you're spending so much time swiping because you have so much more options, and you know, hey, if I keep swiping, I'm going to keep getting more options. So you're okay, but the next option could be amazing. It almost feels like gambling, like, oh, the next one I'm going to win. We can talk about choice overload and decision paralysis by looking at it from more of a, let's say, psychological framework or thought experiment. Let's say we have 2 donut shops. One donut shop, you have 3 options, and the second donut shop, you have 10. People who are more likely to go to the first donut shop with 3 donut options are more likely to buy something and feel satisfied with what they bought, because there's only 3 options: chocolate, strawberry, glaze, right? And so you don't feel like, but what if I got the chocolate? Or what if I got the strawberry? You're more likely to be satisfied with your options, versus if you go to the donut shop with 10 different donuts, you're more likely to find it hard to make a decision, to the point where you might not even make a decision at all. And if you were to make a decision, you might think about, but that triple crispy glazed strawberry glazed donut and all of these other options sound nice. And that is something that scientists and psychologists have proved time and time again. When we have too many decisions and too many choices, it can lead us to not making a choice at all, or being very dissatisfied with the choice that we make. So if we compare it into dating now versus dating then, right? If your dating was only limited to the people in your school or the people in your immediate environment or your immediate site profile, you're more likely to make a decision and feel very satisfied with the decision you're about to make. Whereas now our dating pool has become worldwide almost, not even just the parts that your dating app or your online dating app matches you, it's become worldwide. And so lots of people tend to be dissatisfied with their decision. If you're not meeting people, you're not interacting with people, you're less likely to have sex. I do want to say, and I do want to preface on an opposing view, is there are some benefits to dating apps that are contributing to people having more and great healthy sex lives. Number one being people of sexual minorities. For example, if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, being on a dating app feels a lot safer, right? Because you know, if you have your dating or your sexual orientation displayed on your dating app, the person you're interacting with, you know, is definitely of that sexual orientation. In real life, you have to kind of play this guessing game. Is this person gay? Is this person this? Is this person that? Would this person be open to dating a trans person? And all of these different things that online dating eliminates and provides a more open gateway to getting to know somebody. In addition to that, if somebody likes you on a dating app, swipes right on you, starts talking to you, you know they are attracted to you. You know they're into you. You know they want whatever you want or whatever you displayed on your profile. It eliminates this really awkward dancing game that you might find in real life that might give you some sense of social anxiety. Like, are they into me? Are they being nice to me? What is going on? What is going up? So there are some benefits to online dating app, even if I'm shitting on it. But let's think about it realistically. Are online dating apps conducive for young people having more sex? I don't think so, because it's made the whole dancing game of getting to the point where you can do the bee's knees a little bit more complicated.
Female genius.
It's impossible to do an analysis on the reason why young people are having less sex or sex in general without talking about the big P. Porn. I can't say that. So I'm going to call it the big P, the whole episode. I can say sex. I can swear. But saying that word, I don't know. I don't know. This video is going to get demonetized. I don't even make any money. But if I did, it would be demonetized so fast. We watch a movie and there's sex. A lot of young people are learning about sex the first time through the big P, through the online world, through the online realm. If you ask or survey a bunch of young people, a large amount of young people, particularly boys, have engaged with the big P multiple times, and they've learned a lot of their sexual behavior, not through normal means. I say normal, sorry, shouldn't say anything is normal in this episode. Not through traditional means, such as interacting with a person or learning through sex ed and then just kind of figuring out. And I don't know if some weird older jock guy is telling you this is how you do something. They're typically learning their sexual behaviors and sexual mannerisms and more about sexual etiquette through the big P, which is something that a lot of psychologists and scientists and also people that study social behavior is concerned about. I mean, for example, I read a story on Reddit talking about how this girl was having the doing deed with someone for the first time and they started choking her. And they never gave them consent to do that. They never were like, what are you doing? And they were like, well, this is what I see in the big P. This is what people normally do. Like, do you not like it? And the small little niche things like that, as sexual behavior has leaned more violent or more violent leaning things have become socially accepted. I do want to separate violent sexual behavior from kinks and BDSM. And that is something that could be done a whole episode about it. And I'm actually very intrigued by sexual deviance, actually. But not to say we are having the least amount of sex, but there are loads of statistics that show we are the kinkiest generation ever. We are more accepting of various different kinks. But BDSM and sexual deviance, when practiced safely, is something that requires consent. And there are safe practices about it, like safe words and, agreements of what is acceptable before doing the deed and not just randomly choking someone mid-deed. I don't know. This sounds crazy to me. But a lot of people may ascribe the reasoning for the decline that we're having in our generation being the access to P, the big P online, so easily and so accessible and so free, right? If we go to Japan is a very interesting case study when it comes to population decline, lack of sex decline, and that being forced because it's a governmental concern, okay? Right now, I live in London, I live in the UK. It's like we'll think about it. And 25 years. In Japan, it's like they're racking their heads, they're sweating because the Japanese people not getting married, not getting into couples, not having sex, and the population declining rapidly is a massive point of concern for the government. But I want to disentangle actually talking about population decline and talking about the decline in sex because, they're linked. But I think the decline in population decline is just a lot more complicated than all of the reasons why young people are not having sex. You know what I mean? But stories have illustrated Japanese young people's sexual funk to the rise of something known as Soshuku Danshi, which translates roughly into something called a herbivore man, due to a variety of reasons such as dismal employment prospects, right? Some ascribe it to an imperfect or unexpected demands of real-world relationships, with women being less enticing than virtual libido. This idea that it's so much easier to get your wank off. I don't know how to put that in a way. Do you know how hard it is coming up with innuendos for this episode? Any of my friends know I am... Guys, I love a good sex joke. So this is a really hard episode for me. I'm holding back so much to be professional and to be serious. But anyway, so it's the idea of interacting with real world women when they could create a nice, easy virtual woman that's exactly to their tea and to their taste online, that doesn't shout at them, that doesn't tell them to get a job, that doesn't want more from them, that doesn't interact with them, that doesn't want to give them any more anxiety. They could just do everything online. And it's so much easier. That being said, there are many routes nowadays, and also due to open discussion, that allow for self-satisfaction. And I do not want you guys to take this part as me dissing self-satisfaction. I believe self-satisfaction is incredibly important for having sexual relationships with yourself and with other people as well. And you might think, what's wrong with interacting with a person? You might be an extrovert like me and be like, suck it up. talk to somebody. But actually, a lot of young people suffer with high rates of stress and anxiety, social anxiety to be particular, right? The idea of being rejected by a person is the worst thing that could happen to someone. Like, genuinely, I remember telling my friend, like, go ask him out. And she was like, what? Me? Ask somebody out? What if he says no? You're not going to die. I honestly have a very interesting perspective on asking somebody out. I kind of feel like if I ask somebody out and they tell me no, that's amazing, because now I've saved myself months and months of my imagination driving me crazy. I have saved myself years and years of what if, because that person is just like, no, I'm not attracted to you. Amazing. Thanks for letting me out. Thanks for giving me that piece of information, and now I can move on to my life. They could even say something as like horrible as like, thanks, I don't like black women. No thanks. And it's like amazing, because why would I ever want to be with somebody who doesn't find me attractive? Why would I ever want to be with someone who doesn't like black women? All of these different layers. You're too loud. Why would I want to be with anyone that thinks I'm too loud? You know what I mean? And so that's the point. A lot of young people have a lot of fear of social ostracization and rejection. And this idea of somebody saying no is extremely crippling. And that also shrinks your world of dating and couplehood even more. And so online, the big P, when the hormones come to rise, the big P is here to save the day, right? In popular TED Talk, Gary Wilson argues that the use of internet porn is addictive because it causes structural changes in the brain. And now this is something I've heard for years and years and years. And what was really interesting when researching the episode is that a lot of scientists debate this fact. They're not sure if it does, or the excessive consumption of internet porn actually does cause structural changes of the brain. They're not really sure of what it does to the brain, but there are a lot of scientists that theorize that it does have a lot of damaging effects. I'm not a scientist. I do not study it, and there are lots of contrasting effects, but I do think the excessive consumption of anything is bad. And if it's preventing you from interacting with humans and people in a normal way that is important for your growth and social development, then maybe we need to tone it down, right? We also need to think about, and I come back to this original point again, that if you are learning all of your sexual behaviors and how to have sex, not from a real person, but from online, the big P, I mean, loads of big P stars have come out and said, this is all a performance. Like, this is a show. I'm putting on a show. I'm clocking in Lady Gaga style, and I'm putting on a show. And all of these things that you see people doing are just because they know it's interesting to people and is visually stimulating. But that doesn't replicate the real environment of actual sex. You know what I mean? Some people compare the use of porn to like the use of social media. It's like this idea of doom scrolling. You think that the next post is going to be the post to change your life. The next post, if you can keep scrolling, even though you have things to do, even though you could probably go to bed, even though you could probably read a book, even though you can probably go to a movie, even though you've needed to pee for the last 30 minutes, one more short TikTok video, one more Instagram, because that might be the funniest thing you've seen all day. That might be the most life-changing thing all day. Is this idea of something, it's going to itch something, it's going to itch or scratch. But in reality, we always know, no matter what, that we're not really going to get anywhere. I like to compare or relate this idea of doom scrolling or excessive pee consumption instead of, seeking actual human beings or actual sources of dopamine stimulation, is this idea or this notion that Nietzsche, the philosopher, presents that most people seek distractions in order to avoid confronting deeper questions in life. The big P, you can argue, is this idea where you just get enough satisfaction, where you don't feel like you're missing out on anything, and you don't feel like you're necessarily losing anything by not interacting or not getting up to go pee or not getting up to go sleep or not getting up to do things. But in the long term, you ultimately feel very dissatisfied with your life. You're picking short-term fulfillment against long-term gains. This suggests this idea, and he has this really amazing quote about man suffers so profoundly that he had to invent laughter. This idea that was the rise of big P due to the fact that we have a lot of sexual dissatisfaction. Is it dissatisfaction with the relationship landscape? And I spoke a little bit more about this in the situationship episode, about the rising divide between young men and women. Or is it the fact that you don't want to confront the fact that you might not be sexually attracted to the gender you want to be sexually attracted to? Or are you confronted to the fact that maybe you're just not that confident or happy in your body? There's loads of different factors that might play into this, but it is definitely something to consider. What is your avoidance? Like saying, and I'm not including people who are celibate or abstinent. They have a very clear reason why they're doing what they're doing. But is this avoidance of something because you don't want to question something deeper in yourself? Or is it that you've realized that I actually have a really debilitating habit? Unfortunately, I was exposed to the big P really young, and I just haven't been able to shake it off. And it just itches a scratch in the back of my brain that I can't comprehend or do. And I just don't really want to put myself out there to do anything about that. Right? It suggests that this distraction, like entertainment or even more assistance, are coping mechanisms rather than finding the truth. And that is a very philosophical way to end the discussion on Big P. I do want to say, because I feel like every time I speak very negatively about things, I do want to include an opposing positive side. I personally think from a storytelling perspective, some people are like, it's because we have too much sex on TV. I don't find any issue with it. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much, but I do think sex is a very important storytelling device, and I can go into this in another episode. Oh, maybe that could be the mini episode of next week. Actually, that feels a little bit much. Like there's this, which feels almost scientific, and there's that feels very indulgent. But I do think it is an amazing plot-telling device. And I ascribe it to, like, you know, when you watch Love Island and somebody's acting like crazy and you don't understand why, like, why are they so attached to this person? Why are they doing too much? It's only been a week, blah, 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 blah. And then you find out they've slept together and you're like, oh my God, I get it. I get it. Like, sleeping together and having sex is another layer of intimacy that we're all collectively aware of as human beings. That adds a lot. And so as a storytelling device, the way characters interact and relate to sex and how they have sex, or how often or how little they do so, and in what ways they do so, and with what people, can tell you a lot about the relationships with the characters and also the relationships with different values in society. So I will never hate on a writer or a storyteller including sex in their work, because it is viscerally quite powerful in terms of storytelling. But that being said, also, you know, I think lots of couples on Reddit, when I was going through Reddit, were telling us, like, yeah, I discovered I like this because I watched the Big P. I didn't know this thing existed, and it's rocked my world. Hey, I picked up this amazing tip. And it's changed my boyfriend's life. All of that being said, there's a lot to learn from, you know, this wide, vast accessibility to the Big P that we have to also consider. But with everything, too much of something and an avoidance of something is not good.
Female genius.
So let's talk about body image, okay? With the rise of porn and also the transition into a society so focused on visuals, the amount of body dysmorphia in both men and women and other is rising. And that can contribute or could potentially be some of the reasons of the lack of sex Gen Z is having. Ultimately, if you do not feel comfortable in your body, if you don't feel like you're sexy and hot, you probably won't be having sex. In an addition side to that, on the flip side, if you have a certain view of what is sexually attractive because of what the Big P or social media might portray, it also might diminish your sexual attraction to everyday people, because in reality, that's not what a large amount of people look like. Mental health and social media and body dysmorphia is not something I have to prove. It's something that I have experienced myself, something that you might have experienced yourself. This notion and this idea of comparing yourself to somebody and to this idea of perfection that whatever big capitalist machine wants to push, guys, it's crazy seeing it in real time. 6-7 years ago, having the biggest ass possible was the most attractive thing. It was so attractive that people were getting BBLs, one of the most dangerous surgeries you could ever get, just to achieve that body structure. And now I'm in a time where skinny is tea, and like everybody's doing Pilates and not weightlifting and eating 2 avocados and an apple, and like we're just going in cycles. And it's so crazy to see that in real time, how body types and trends and things shift and change depending on the time. And imagine if you are a slave to that within your body. I read this amazing article, which is probably what inspired me to redo this episode 3 times. I'm going to read it out to you. And so this person, I will try and find this tweet and the link to this article, but it was basically talking about how nobody is erotic anymore. And everybody's kind of sexy. And like this over-sexualization of the human body has spoiled this notion of being erotic. And then somebody then referenced in the comments was like, this is probably like the reason why Gen Z is having less sex than ever. And then somebody quoted this, and it's by somebody called R.S. Benedict in their article. This is not my words. I have to preface that, is a body is no longer a holistic system. It is not the vehicle through which we experience joy and pleasure during our brief time in the land of the living. It is not a home to live in and be happy. It too is a collection of features: 6-pack, thigh gap, cum gutters. I didn't know what a cum gutter was. I had to Google it. It's a V line. And these features exist not to make our lives more comfortable, but to increase the value of our assets. Our bodies are investments which must always be optimized to bring us what exactly? And then when you sit and think about it, we agree. We often, and I always say this, is like when I'm in the throes of hating myself the most and hating my features and hating my body, is I'm always looking at myself through the lens of what I think other people will think of my body. And why I'm think what other people might think of my body is the media and things I consume about what is an amazing and hot person's body. And I'm like, well, I don't have that. So therefore, I'm lacking in something, and I dox 2 points. And okay, I don't have this, so that's dox 2 points. But you know what? At least I have this, and at least I have this. That must mean something. But hey, how can I acquire this so then I can be more attractive? For what? For who? You know? And when we have this idea of trying to collect, this means, and again, if you're doing things for your health, if you're doing things to make yourself feel more confident, I will never shame or like hate on anybody for doing so. But I do think it's something to question, like, why are we chasing this random ideal? And so when we link it back in a very long-winded way to the lack of sex people having, right, is that if I am going into a situation where I'm having to be completely physically intimate with someone and giving somebody the opportunity to look at my body in a way that is based off of attraction and solely how attracted they are, the fear of rejection and this fear of being perceived just comes. It's a fear of being received, fear of rejection is like boss level. Okay. And now we are, and so now I can feel like that can be quite pressure, and it might make you avoid that situation, avoid it for all costs, because you see it as imperfect and you see sex as something that somebody should do only when they are at their most level of attractive. And that is not healthy, and that is extremely dangerous. There is this TikTok video of these young girls, and like they're 12 and 13. It broke my heart. And I think they're Australian because they were talking in an Australian accent. So the Australian girls were basically talking, and I wonder if it's part of a documentary. I know it was a TikTok clip, so it was really short, but it left an impression on me, which is rare in the hundreds of TikToks I consume a day. Um, and so it was these young girls basically being like, oh, like, the boys compare us to the girls in the Bop House. The Bop House, if you're unaware, is a content house specifically for OF girls or OnlyFans girls that make obviously OnlyFans content of the sexually explicit nature. And are basically being like, well, they compare us to these OF girls and we look nothing like them and we can never look anything like them. And so boys just don't like us. And I go and I see them and I think, how could I ever look like that? Or how can I make myself look like that so I can be loved? And like one of them was like, I just don't think I'd even get married one day because who would find me attractive enough to get married? That is crazy that these 12-year-old girls are saying that. But it's ultimately very true. I mean, there's a flip side to this entire conversation, which I mentioned in the beginning, is we are also creating and curating standards that we are now judging other people with. We are now being, well, if you're not this and this and this, and you don't have this, 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 and this, how can I find you sexually attractive? This is what social media and society has told me is attractive, and you do not measure up.
Female genius.
It might not be that dubious. Okay, I spent a lot of episodes digging and hitting at a bunch of different points about how, sex is there, sex is there, big T's that, and we're not having enough sex. Okay, but there are actually some different reasons why, right? We are the most sexually open generation. I've spoken about this many times. We discuss sex more openly other than generations, other than something that's been limited to a discussion of in marriage or between lads and something that girls shouldn't hear about. We're talking about it. I'm talking about it on a podcast, for goodness sakes, and exploring the different reasonings and facts. And so that is a very, very powerful thing. And so I think because we're talking about it more, people know what they're getting into, and more people might feel empowered to just say, no, nah, I'm not into it. Nah, I don't really want to participate in hookup culture. No, you do not put your thing near me. I don't want it. All right. A lot more people just feel a lot more empowered to say no in relationships as well. And even within situations, they recognize that they have power and autonomy over their own bodies, and they are completely within their own right, as they should be, to say, no, I don't want that. And I think the acceptance of LGBT communities, and particularly asexuality and aromanticness, I was going to say aromanticy, asexuality and how do you say it? I'm going to cut that out. asexuality has meant that now people understand is there are more nuances and complexities in relationships that people wouldn't really take before. Some people might want to enter romantic relationships and never ever do the deed, right? And some people may be very comfortable with that. Some people may want to only enter a relationship that is only for the purpose of doing the deed. And sex education has now become more digital. I remember referencing and talking about in the beginning how I wasn't sitting down and cracking open a beer with my dad and talking about sex. Mainly, a lot of conversations and a lot of the ways I've learned about the nuances and things about sex are through the online medium. It's through episodes like Call It Daddy talking about the Gluck Gluck 9000. It's through Reddit platforms talking about, hey, is this normal? It's me talking to my friends about their experiences and collecting and curating a pile of knowledge and things to do with that. I'm really holding back from sharing stories on this episode because I know it's going to come back to haunt me and I really don't want that. But um, I feel like sometimes sex can be something that you might really feel pressured to do because you kind of have to do it. And oh, you need to get it out of the way. You need to rip the band-aid off. You need to do it because nobody wants to do this with a virgin and da 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 da. And if you sit in that category, chill, bro, like chill. If you're waiting for a special someone, if you're waiting till you're at a certain stage in your life, if you're waiting till you're ready and you're comfortable, don't let anybody shame you into doing that. Don't let anybody scare you into rushing into doing things. But I do again want to say, like I said in the beginning, if there's something that really spoke to you, if you're like, wow, maybe I do have a really bad, poor body image. I didn't realize it. Oh wow, maybe I do have a massive big P problem. Oh wow, I'm so broke. I can't do anything you recommended. I recommend that you begin to question and grow, and that's what we do on Female Genius. We think, we ponder, we sit and we stroke our imaginary beards. But that being said, I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, this unofficial guide. I'm kind of nervous to upload it, but I hope you guys get the point. And if there's anything that's like research or data, I'm so fascinated by this topic, please do send it my way. And yeah, I don't really know how to end an episode like this. I feel like we've spoken about a lot. Okay, and you know me, I'm an awkward babe. I'm funny, I'm extroverted, but I'm extremely awkward. And so I don't really know how to carry myself in situations like this when I've really spoken about something that might make you turn down your headphones as you walk past your mum in the kitchen because I've said the word sex too many times. I don't even know if I can upload this on YouTube. Can I? This might be an audio only. So, the next one is the feminine urge towards madness. And this episode, it's so closely linked. I feel like all of these episodes feel like sequels to episodes I've done in early seasons. So this deep dive into the sex lives of Gen Z is like a sequel to the situationship episode. And the feminine urge towards madness is a sequel to like when women are the villains. You know what I mean? I think everything is like a sequel to something. So I'm very, very excited. Anyway, geniuses, I'll see you next time on Female Genius. Cue my theme song.
Female Genius.